If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
From across Cardiff and around the world on the internet, I'm Kevin Moore and welcome to another edition of The More Show. Now, my guest today is filmmaker Leon Stuparich, whose latest documentary, Road to Peace, candidly reveals the Dalai Lama's nature and wisdom and shows how he has inspired millions of people of all nationalities and creeds to live more meaningful lives in harmony with each other and with the planet. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual and political leader of 6 million Tibetan people and winner of the Nobel Peace Prize for his non-violent approach to the liberation of Tibetan people. Leon Stuparich, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. It really is. I was just saying off air there. I watched the whole of the documentary, and it sort of sucks you in, and it's a powerful. There's some really powerful quotes in there as well. And I think let's start off with the first one: universal responsibility.
I mean, the whole message of the Dalai Lama is to better people more than you better yourself. I mean, that's kind of the essence of Buddhism, is what you can do for others rather than what you can do for yourself. So he's the living embodiment of that, really. He's one of the few people that I can name on my hand, 5 people probably on the planet at the moment that you could say coherently do that and walk their talk, really. Universal responsibility is essentially the idea that we're all responsible for everything that happens around us. So we're responsible for ourselves, responsible for each other. If there's something that's happening in the world that we're not happy with, and then we have to look at what we can do within ourselves and externally to change that.
Yeah, I've got to, I suppose, go back here a little bit because there's so much to talk about. There's so many angles we could take with this, right? But one of them is as well is, how did you get to meet and do this documentary? And how did you get to spend a year with the Dalai Lama behind the scenes?
Well, it wasn't quite a year. I wish it was a year. It's about 2 weeks, about 2.5 weeks.
Sorry,
when he was in the UK
yes.
a few years ago. Making the film has taken quite a few years, but it was a fortuitous set of circumstances that brought me to spend the time with him. I was with a friend, and we were working on another project together, and he spoke to the Office of Tibet in London, who look after the Dalai Lama when he's in the UK and deal with his affairs in Europe as well. And he was talking to them about a documentary he was making for Al Jazeera about a train line that the Chinese are building between Beijing and Lhasa. And in that conversation, they mentioned the Dalai Lama is coming to the UK next year. Do we want to put together a proposal to film his visit? And he phoned me up and said, I guess what we've just been asked to do, and we put the proposal together, and they liked what we said. And it was, it sounds simple, but it was a lot of kind of jumping through hoops, but we were very, very fortunate to be given the permission.
Okay. So where did you stand with spirituality or religion prior to this time that you spent with him on this documentary?
I was curious. I guess I was like many people in a position where not brilliantly contented with everything in life. I was always a curious person since I was a child, and always looking internally. I suppose I was quite an existentialist child, so I was always looking for the connections in things and looking around at what the nature of reality was in many senses. I kind of started off by thinking about strange things like dragons. I lived in Wales for a few years, so dragons were quite heavily in my life when I was there. But I started thinking, how come there are dragons in Wales and dragons in China, and this mythology that spread across the world, and it kind of just got me thinking in a broader way, I suppose, about how things fit together, and just started questioning. And then went forward from there, really. And then I heard about this guy called the Dalai Lama, and thought, he sounds like an interesting guy. He sounds like someone who's got some promises, some answers, And I started to do some research, and as a filmmaker and someone who studied film, I looked for as many films as I could about him, and I read a little bit, but I couldn't find any films that really showed me what he was like as a character. But yeah, as from a personal standpoint of spirituality and religion, it was more a curiosity, really.
Okay, so where do you stand now?
Well, I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist, but I suppose I'm like many people, really, a bit of a spiritual shopper. I take bits and pieces that come across, that resonate with me, that make me that feel right, but also that challenge me. But I think the biggest lesson from studying the Dalai Lama and his message of universal responsibility and peace and interreligious harmony as well is that, it's, the most important thing is to be truthful to yourself and be kind to others. And that in itself is a religion. I mean, I think the Dalai Lama said, my religion is kindness. And it's a philosophy, and I think that's why Buddhism tends to resonate with more and more people, is that the philosophy behind it really brings it back down to the deep human values of how we relate to each other and to the nature of the world around us.
Mm-hmm. And without trying to put words in your mouth, then you would say there has been a shift in your thinking after going through this process of looking very deeper into some of the meanings that have come through on the film as well. I mean, when you edited this documentary, you must have seen it with different eyes.
It really was during the editing that things started to come together, because whilst filming him, in many senses, I was just working, and I was trying to, with the team, just capture everything we possibly could and put ourselves in the right position to see what was happening and to see how he was, because we didn't know. It was a fly-on-the-wall documentary, so we didn't know what was going to be happening 1 minute to the next. And it was during the editing process, as I was starting to take the film apart and put it back together again and find out what is the true essence and what does universal responsibility mean and what is his message. Studying of that started to work deeply within it started to influence my everyday actions, I suppose. Because when you're editing, it's like when you're writing a book, so your focus is really deep within it, so you come out of it at the other end, and you can't help, I think, but be influenced.
Absolutely. So let us just go to one quote that he mentions in there's many great quotes in the film. Peace, for example. Peace does not end. I hope I'm not going to misquote this, but peace does not mean end of conflict. To keep peace, you need spiritual dialogue. Now,
yes.
I think what he was trying to surmise as well was that this is a century of dialogue, and if we were to go down that route, peace, it could be a reality. Peace within ourselves. It starts within ourselves, and that then illuminates peace for the world. I mean, is that what he was trying to say?
Well, he was saying it was more about keeping a spirited dialogue rather than conflict. So what he was saying was that conflict is bound to happen in society. We're always going to have disagreements. We're always going to have moments where, we accidentally crash our car into somebody else. But the resolution we seek should be through speaking and talking things through before resorting to, getting out the stick. Or
and what you mentioned before is,
it's very very simple kind of idea, but I think with the Dalai Lama, a lot of the things he says, like many other spiritual teachers, sound very simple, but when you start to take the individual words apart and you start to take the phrases apart, you realize that beneath that, in order for that dialogue to happen, you need deep compassion and deep awareness within yourself in order to be able to control your reaction to a situation like that, and have the willingness to see the situation from the other side, which is easier.
Yeah, but that's easier said than done, isn't it? I mean, when you're in the heat of the moment and you're the anger's there, it's difficult to sometimes put that to one side and come from a standpoint of peace, dialogue through peace as well. But then I suppose you're most probably taking the upper hand by representing yourself like that and coming across like that to whatever the situation may be.
I guess so. I heard a brilliant quote the other day that the Dalai Lama says a true hero is someone that has overcome anger, and that's kind of putting the scale of the task that it takes to overcome anger on a real, on the platform that it should be, because it's not an easy task. It's in many senses it's an idealistic concept, but really just with the intention of saying we want to overcome this situation. I don't, making a decision that violence isn't something that we're gonna enter into. You're turning the situation around immediately, I think, and you are. It's not that you're taking an upper hand on the situation, but it's more that, going back to another quote that's in the film, the famous Gandhi quote, is that we be the change we want to see in the world. So if you want to live in a world that's more peaceful without violence, then it's quite simple. You don't engage in violence yourselves.
And another quote that struck me as well was that, everyone thinks of change in the world, but not changing themselves.
Yes, that was a Tolstoy quote. Interestingly, Tolstoy had a massive spiritual awakening after he wrote War and Peace and denounced all of his previous work, and became a vegetarian and went on a very spiritual, deep path. And it was quite amazing when you think of people throughout history who have been saying very, very similar, if not the same message that the Dalai Lama is saying. That's the reason why throughout the film you have quotes from many spiritual leaders and individuals who have found a certain wisdom throughout their life in the film, to give a greater context that the message isn't solely to the Dalai Lama. I think the Dalai Lama represents the message to a lot of people, but we look through Mother Teresa, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, many people. That's just our recent history. Many people throughout history have been saying very, very similar messages. But I think the blessing for us at the moment is that the Dalai Lama is still alive, and we can go and hear him speak and listen to him talk for 2 or 3 hours about how to improve our lives, and that's something that I think will be sorely missed when he eventually passes. But at the moment, it's very, very powerful. And on the other side of that, he's resigned from the political situation so he can concentrate on the spiritual message. So I think he's becoming more focused on the spiritual message in the last couple of years since he resigned.
That's right. He resigned from the administration of the Tibetan people, which actually isn't based in Tibet, is he? I mean, the administration for Tibet is based. Is it on the border of India, or in India? Is it?
It's in northern India. It's the effectively the government in exile, because the situation in Tibet is quite a dire situation. It's 54 years ago, the Dalai Lama left Tibet in 1959, and hasn't been able to return since. So the Tibetan government reformed in India, but more as a cultural entity to try and keep the education and the spirituality of Tibetan culture and Tibetan Buddhism alive, with the hope that one day they can go back to Tibet once there's a peaceful resolve with China.
It's not so straightforward, is it? And that's another thing I didn't. Obviously, I've not done too much research into the history of the Dalai Lama, but how do they choose the next predecessor, and how do they choose the previous one? These are supposed to be reincarnated souls that have come down for this particular task.
It's a really interesting process. It's been recorded a few times, and it was in the Martin Scorsese film called Kundun. And there's a brilliant documentary called The Unmistaken Child that takes you through the process of the dying Lama all the way through to his reincarnation being found. And traditionally, the dying Lama, or the Lama on his way out, will start to, in the last few years, he will start to leave clues as to where his reincarnation is going to be. And then once he dies, they look for clues amongst the ashes, and they seek spiritual guidance. And it's almost looking in beyond reality for those questions. They go into a trance and seek guidance that way, and then they go on a process of finding this child that they got through those messages, and then they perform various tests on the child to see whether it is the reincarnation. And the tests are some of them are markings on the body, but I think the main tests they display an array of artifacts in front of the child and see which artifacts the child picks up. And as it's portrayed in Kundun, the 14th Dalai Lama, he picked up various items from the table that used to belong to him when he was the 13th Dalai Lama, and that was one of the big indications that he was the reincarnated Lama. And then when he was eventually back in Lhasa and he was in one of his old rooms, he turned around to one of his lamas who knew him in his previous incarnation, and I think the story goes that he asked, I think it was his glasses, and the lamas kind of looked at him and said, "What do you mean?" And they went off and got his glasses and gave them to him, and he was very happy. It's hard to know how much of that is legend and how much of that is fact, but I think it's a fascinating story. I suppose a lot of it, like our British monarchy, a lot of it with pomp and circumstances there to help keep the tradition alive. But I think with the Buddhist idea of reincarnation is something that they clearly proved exists through their belief for many years.
Yeah, I find the Buddhist religion very gentle, very gentle. I call myself spiritual. I wouldn't say I'm religious in any context, but I believe that life carries on. No, when I was over in Malaysia, and went to some of the temples over there, very, very, very different feel to some of the other religions out there. But I think the Dalai Lama would promote. One of his promotions is religious harmony. That all religions lead to the same path of love. Surely that's what's behind every religion. It is unconditional love. Yes,
well, love and compassion are the basis of humanity, according to the Dalai Lama. And as he was saying in the film, when he met the Archbishop of Canterbury, he was saying that's at the heart of every major religion, is love and compassion. And I think that's a great leveler, because you realise that actually beneath it all, we're all human and we're all fundamentally the same. We all have the same desires, the same needs for affection, the same needs for love. And without those, then I think we without affection and without love, I think we end up in trouble. I think we become emotionally lost, and I think that's part of the problem that we're currently facing in Western society, is that our family structure and our social structure has been gently ebbed away over time, and now we're in a situation where we don't live with our grandparents and our children. We don't have 2, 3, 4 generations living in the same house. So we've lost our connection with age, and we've lost our connection with our children have lost their connection with the grandparents as much, and the parents of the children are under more stress because the grandparents of the children aren't around, and it becomes more difficult, and we lose that loving and affectionate connection that binds us.
Yeah.
And I think I think that those simple virtues actually are something that, the idea of living with your mother-in-law might not seem like the greatest idea for world peace, but really, I think that's part of the challenges we face. And if we can't face living with our relatives, how can we face creating a world where there is no conflict? If that's what we aspire to live in.
That's right. We seem to have lost the idea. It's not. I don't know if we seem to have lost the idea, but that connection that we all come from the same place, that we are all equal, that we are, no matter what skin color we've got, we're equal in the spiritual sense. That probably Buddhism would agree with as well. That there is no difference. It's just an illusion on the front. Yet we. If we saw each other as connected, as I'm connected with you, as you are connected with me, as the whole world is family, well, we wouldn't treat our family, not all of us, the way that some of these dictators and rulers treat their own people.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think one of the issues in understanding how connected we are is just how powerful our everyday actions are, not just to ourselves, but to other people. We might not realize that a little look or a little glance or a movement that's too quick or raising our voice to a certain level will have an impact far beyond what we can see. There was a situation a few years ago where I was walking through central London, and there was a guy who was quite angry, he was quite upset. And he was walking down Charing Cross Road, and he was shouting at the top of his voice very loudly, and there was a perceptible bubble of people around him, like people were keeping their distance by a good 20, 30 meters, and you could almost see the distance that he was affecting people just on a comfort zone of people not wanting to be near him. And obviously you could hear him from much further away, and the anxiety that people were feeling around me on the other side of the street, you were cautious, and that's one demonstration of the power that we emit. But then you talk about being in a Buddhist monastery, and I think it's the opposite. They're giving they're not shouting, not angry. They're transmitting love, and they're transmitting the opposite energy, if you like, that you can perceptibly feel from 20, 30, 40 meters away. And I think that's where we start to understand, actually, our actions do create the world around us. And it goes deeper. The Buddha said, our thoughts create reality. So I mean, it can go to a very subtle level, but on a very practical, real level, I think that's something that can be, you can test it tomorrow, walking down the street and smile at people or frown at people, and you'll see the difference.
Just a smile at someone that you don't know, it's it makes a difference sometimes, and if they don't smile back, so what, it's fine, Do we need to do an action for someone? Do we need something in return? Well, we're sort of fed to be that way, but we don't. It doesn't have to be that way. You can change. Change happens in the now.
Absolutely. I remember when I first started looking into, changing myself, I suppose, from an existential child, and realizing just how afraid I was to smile at strangers. You know, I think I still have that. You know, I walk down the street and I try and make an effort to smile at people. Sometimes when they smile back at me and engage and start nodding, I don't know what to do. I kind of look away and go, you might want to talk to me, and I don't know what to say.
It's the same thing.
But I think
it's the same thing as living in an apartment with someone. You know, or these shared flats, whatever it may be. You know, you're in a lift with someone and no one acknowledges each other. They just put their head down. And it's like, hang on a minute, are we that dumbed down that we can't even, you know, just make that eye contact? Just, we've lost that connection with one another. And, you know, you hear these great spiritual leaders, like, for example, Eckhart Tolle and other people that say that, you know, if we don't change our ways, there's some problems on the horizon. No, the
interesting thing, though, is the connection is still there. It's just beneath the surface. If you sit on the tube in London or you sit on a bus in Cardiff and everyone's got their head down, if you're the one that makes the effort, you'll be surprised at how quickly everyone turns around. I mean, it's interesting being a tourist in your own city with a backpack on, and people look at you differently. They're less afraid to engage with you. There's a conversation that can be had. Oh, where have you been? What are you up to? You know, and I think you're feeling lighter because you've got your world on your back and you're freer. And people do engage, and I think that can happen without the backpack on. If you start, strike up a conversation with somebody that's a stranger on public transport or wherever you are, you'd be surprised at how quickly people spark up, because the idea that we're all fundamentally the same means that if you're feeling that, the person next to you is also feeling that. It's also thinking, why isn't that person talking to me? Why has everyone got their head down? They're probably looking at you, thinking exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be change, if you want to see change, sometimes you've got to be the change as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the big moments for me last year was understanding that we talk about being the change. But we also talk about peace being a state of mind, and I think it's a slight mistranslation. I spoke about this quite a bit last year. I think peace is actually a state of being rather than a state of mind. People want to be like the Dalai Lama. People want to be the change in the world. It's how we are. It's not how we think. It's through our actions that will really make the difference.
Yes,
and that could be. It could be helping somebody up a curb if they can't get up a curb, or it could be going out and doing a random act of kindness, or it could be, just sitting thinking, what can I do to make my partner happier today? Can I do something that is going to make her day or his day? And maybe that's buying a bunch of flowers. I mean, that's made your world better. It has, measurably made your world that little bit better. What can you do? How can you be that's gonna make that change in the world?
Do you think you've made some people's world a little bit brighter, a little bit better by doing this documentary?
I would hope so. I mean, I think that was the point in doing it. I think once I realised I had the access and we had the film there, even before it was complete, just having the access and knowing the filming, and I just felt a huge responsibility that this film would have to be there that will bring across the Dalai Lama in a way. So it's not really that I've made people's lives better or happier. It's that I've helped to transmit the Dalai Lama's message through the medium of film and bring the essence of him across a little bit.
By doing what you love to do as well. So by doing what you love to do, it was a direct action of helping others as well. But do you think you knowingly went out there to do this documentary to help others, or do you think that was a byproduct of doing the documentary that you realised actually you were helping others?
Well, when I first started hearing about the Dalai Lama, I wanted to see a film that could show me what he was like as a person. And that's the film I wanted to make. And I hadn't met him before, so I didn't know what he was actually going to be like. He could have been a nuisance. He could have all been for show, but it wasn't. How he is in the film. It's exactly how he is as a person. I mean, we had a screening with the Dalai Lama's representative a while back, and he looked at the film afterwards, and he just kind of looked at it and went, "Yep, that's what he's like." And that was, I think, for me, that was one of the biggest compliments I could take, was that that it achieved that aim of bringing across the Dalai Lama how he is in his daily life, and that, you know, for many people that's extremely inspiring, because he doesn't really put people on a pedestal. He treats everybody like, as you said, like brother and sister. I saw him last year when he was giving a talk at the St. Paul's Cathedral when he won the Templeton Prize, and he was talking about different hierarchies and different names of different politicians and people's stature. And so the higher up you get, the more unpronounceable you get, and you know you can't. And he just forgets it all. He says everybody's essentially just the same. We all treat each other like brother or sister. That's all. And I think that really comes across. And I think it's really important for us to remember that. And if it helps keep the memory of the Dalai Lama going and the message that he brings, then all the better for it.
Yeah, I mean, you're so lucky to get that access. I mean, obviously it was. I do believe in things are meant to be, and I think this was meant to be for you. You're meant to get that access, but you know, there's many people that would love to even interview the chap, let alone, you know, to be able to spend that time with him. Yeah, I mean, it's not normal, is it?
No. There have been people that have had more access. You know, there have been people that have had access to him for there was another film crew that had access to him for a year. But I think the difference with Road to Peace was that I was after the spiritual man. I was trying to find out how he was as a person, and not so interested in.
Yeah.
The Tibet issue is a huge issue, but it wasn't kind of my main focus. I wanted to find out why he was selling out stadiums around the world, and why people were coming away saying, well, that man's got an amazing energy, an amazing presence, and it changed my life just being near him. And that was fascinating to me. I thought, well, how is this possible? I remember speaking to my cousin when I was in my teens, and he said he saw the Dalai Lama drive past once in a car, and he said he could feel his energy. And it was like, this was a Croatian teenager telling me that he was feeling the energy of this Tibetan man driving past in a car. And that was you know, that's something that you sit there going, well, is that real?
Yeah.
Is that something that's truly there?
Yeah, and also as well. How did other? I mean, obviously this is just for the DVD release is coming. It's on the. Let me get this right. It's the 5th of April. 5th of April. Yeah, which is a Friday at 7 p.m. And we'll get to that in a bit. But I mean, have you had any success getting this on to sort of national TV networks as well?
It's interesting one. My background is in television and documentaries, and I've done a bit of film work, so I know the TV industry quite well, and I've spoken to a lot of commissioners and executive producers about the film. And I think in the UK, it's more tricky to get a film like this on television. I think outside of the UK, that they're a bit more receptive. That's a bit of a generalization, but in the UK, I think we tend to be a little bit more cynical in the media.
Yeah.
And when we were at the beginning, because we were looking for co-productions to make the film, so that we had a bit of funding and a bit of support, and none of it came about because right at the beginning they wanted to put, you know, Louis Theroux with the Dalai Lama, or, you know, some effusive celebrity with the Dalai Lama the whole time, because that's what they, you know, that was the way that they could sell the documentary to TV, or they wanted some kind of massive exposition that would, you know, show him as an angry person or something, you know. And it's like, well, firstly, we're not going to put, you know, someone with the Dalai Lama just for the sake of it, because that's defeating the purpose of the film, because he's not going to come across in the right way. And secondly, I don't know what's going to happen in the film, because we hadn't filmed it yet. And I then went on to make a film without any voiceover, which is, you know, rarely seen on television these days. And a film that's largely a spiritual film. So, you know, I think it's more of a humanitarian film, but it certainly has a large spiritual element in it. If I concentrated on the Tibet issue, it would have been a much easier sell for television. But my main goal with the whole film was for it to be seen by people in the position that I was in when I first started becoming interested in the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
So it was to connect it with the audience.
But isn't it sad though? Isn't it sad that we live in an environment in media where those of the few make the decisions for the many on what it is they should watch. Now, I know we can't go around asking everyone what they want to watch, but I mean, that is the way it works, isn't it? That those few in the power decide what we watch, the same as what we listen to as well. And then you've got the Ofcom regulations on top of that of what you can and can't say. It's
and then you've got the political influence of the government that says what news can and can't be broadcast.
Well, yes. So when it comes to something like this, where it's the spiritual side of the Dalai Lama, not the Tibetan political side, it's such a shame that it all comes down to what they view as, I suppose, viewing figures for what's popular and not. Yet, there is a thirst for this kind of stuff more than ever nowadays.
Well, I think that we have to remember that television is made by people, firstly, and as people become more aware of the growing, if you like, alternative spirituality, as Buddhism in the UK is an alternative religion. Really, it's not a Christian or Catholic religion. As that grows, then people are becoming more aware of what it is, but I think it's indicative of where we are generally as a society. But it's like, is that feeling in society created by television, or is television reflecting society back? It's hard to know, but I do think there's a responsibility within mainstream media to not be afraid to do what it was designed to do, and that's put forward ideas and inspirational, programming that will get people to think, hold on a minute, maybe life is a bit bigger than just EastEnders 3 or 4 times a week. I think it's people do watch the soap operas like you wouldn't believe. And is that because we're looking for a connection in real life? I don't know. Maybe. I haven't watched a soap opera in about 10 years because I couldn't stand the shouting anymore. But I remember growing up as a kid thinking that was kind of normal. That shouting was, what real life was, and it was like, where do you, what are you teaching your children if that's what they grow up watching?
Well, that's right. I mean, I'm all up for programs that entertain, right? And entertainment programs are important because we all need to be entertained. But when it comes to subjects like this, and I'm repeating like a parrot here, but it just unfortunately, sadly, doesn't get the attention of some of the execs to broadcast shows. But things will change, and they are changing.
Hopefully. Hopefully. I mean, they'll change once they realise there's an audience for it.
Yes.
I think that's going to be one of the big things.
Well, let's get to that with the how was the reception on the launch night, and so far what has been the feedback on the documentary?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, I did the launch screening was in June last year in the Prince Charles Cinema in central London in the West End, and we had nearly 300 people in the audience, and it was really, really well received. Everyone came away from that screening really kind of feeling like the Dalai Lama was in the room. I mean, it's when people watch the film, I don't know what your experience was, Kevin, but when people watch the film, they tend to feed back to me that it was like they were with the Dalai Lama. And in a larger audience, that feeling tends to get amplified. So it was really special. I mean, we had a lovely evening with we had Tibetan monks chanting that set the atmosphere really beautifully. We had lots of live music and dialogue around the film as well, because I think it's really important to discuss the message within the film and not to just go away feeling like you learn a bit more and then you go home and forget about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it has been the reception's been fantastic. I've since taken it to New York when the Dalai Lama was in New York in October, and we had, we were blessed to have, Tushar Gandhi, who's the great grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. He did the Q&A with me there. We had 6-time Grammy Award winner David Sanborn. He introduced the film, and the musician from the film, a Tibetan flautist called Nawan Khechog, who's endorsed by the Dalai Lama, and he's the most incredible orator on peace. I mean, that was an amazing event.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting what you just said there. You said that the Q&A was very important to you, and do you find that actually the Q&A was, watching the film was one thing, but but that was a byproduct of getting to what the real meat and bones is, the Q&A for the film.
Well, I think what's important after the film is that the Dalai Lama set an example of how we can be, and it creates an atmosphere where everyone in the audience is sitting there thinking, oh, maybe I can be like the Dalai Lama. And then the question is how, and that's where the dialogue comes in. I think it's really important to just keep the discussion going and interact with the audience and not be, not hide behind the stage as soon as the film's finished and, just get a round of applause and thank you very much. I think it's important that, I share my experience and what I've learned through making the film, but also facilitate what other people want to know, and people come away bursting with questions of not just what's the Dalai Lama like, but how do you apply his message in your life. And I'm not the Dalai Lama, so I can't answer all those questions, but I think with a dialogue you can discuss those questions, and that's the most important thing.
Yes, absolutely. And what's the path for you now? Once where do you see yourself going now? Now you've done this documentary.
Well, the road to peace for me is going to continue. I think for another for another few months, probably another year, to help promote the film and give it a really good standing. In April next month, 3.5 weeks' time, actually, we've got another special event that we're putting on in London at the Union Chapel, which is an amazing live music venue, but also a working church. And that's to launch the DVD, as you mentioned before. And we've got the monks coming back. We've got more live music. We've actually got the Dalai Lama's representative coming down to do the Q&A. So that's going to be an interesting one. And that's going to give us the funds and the platform to take it forward around the world, to keep spreading the message as we go forward. In June, we're going to Albuquerque to a fantastic event, the Albuquerque Film and Media Experience, which we're having a gold carpet premiere, which will just be so beautiful at one of the most prestigious theatres in Albuquerque. We're being hosted by the mayor and the whole town as part of this festival, and that's going to be something really special. Then I think we're on to Washington, I think, and then the Dalai Lama is going to be in Australia, and then we're going to follow him there, and we're discussing how we can screen the film around Australia. But I think we're probably going to be screening the film after the events and during the events when he's there. So that's going to be special.
Right. So it really is. This is the year for the road for peace for you, and nothing else.
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I'm still keeping my ear to the ground about different projects and the next thing to do. But because this film isn't being distributed in the conventional sense, it's a very hands-on process, and it's something that is it's a full-time job to put the events on and manage them and make sure they're as electric as they can be, really, and as special as they can be.
And Leon, anybody listening to this who would like to do their own screens, to have their own launch of the film, can they just get in contact with yourself?
Absolutely. You can get in contact through the website, which is roadtopeacefilm.com, and there's details on there of how to host your own screening, or just get in touch with us through the website as well. I think that's something that is probably the best way to help share the message of peace and universal responsibility, and bring a little piece of Dalai Lama into your community is by hosting your own screening. And if you've got local musicians, then bring them along and do some live music, and make sure you give some time for a Q&A at the end, because you're guaranteed that people will be waiting in a bit to discuss what they just seen.
Absolutely, and
that's around the world as well. We've done a few of these already, and they've gone everywhere from Australia to the States. We've had requests from South Africa and all over the place. So it's been really good so far.
I think it's just you've got a lot of work ahead of yourself, but it's a work of joy. It really is. I mean, and again, I've seen the documentary, and it really is a good watch. And again, the DVD sales they launch on, is that right, on the 5th of April?
5th of April, that's right. So we're taking pre-orders now through the website, but they're going to be shipping from the 5th of April. If you're coming along to the Union Chapel, then you can pick them up on the night, and I'll be there signing DVDs, so you can have a signed copy. But yeah, from the 5th of April, they'll be ready in the UK. So.
Okay, well, Leon Stuparich, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for your time. Thanks for the conversation.
Well, thank you. And to find out more about on the Road to Peace, just go to www.roadtopeace.co.uk, and also there'll be links on the website for the film, and to get in contact with Leon as well. So until next time, thanks for joining us.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.